alaikum to my brothers. Blessings and peace to all my Christians out there. Spirituality, vibrations to all my oneness people out there. All of the correct terminology. What's going on, everybody? Thank everybody for tuning in to My Unapologetic Perspective, where we're here to give our perspective about the history and the things regarding African American people, unapologetically in our own way. We like to thank everybody for tuning in to the past few episodes. I apologize for the last episode for a little bit of audio difficulties. We've been struggling here for about 30 minutes trying to get the audio right. But we're here, and we're here to give you more information and more perspective in our own way. We're joined again by my co-host, my father, Jerome Battle. How are you, sir? So one of the things that we want is for people that watch this to give us some feedback, give us your perspective, give us some of your thoughts of what you think. It don't even have to be in agreement with us. You know, we just want people to think. So for the people watching, you know, we don't want just that was good or we love that. We kind of want some feedback. We want conversation. Is the most important thing to grasp some of these things that are going on in the world. This episode is brought to you by Her Protection, which is here to give you a fighting chance in dangerous and harmful situations, giving you protection, power, peace of mind. Our self-defense keychain are stylish and loaded with pepper spray, window breaker, taser, and more. Get protected with Her Protection. And you can follow them on Facebook at her-protection, CO, period, or follow the owner on Facebook at Chastity Cheatwood. So again, Her Protection is a keychain that you can get that has, pepper spray, a window breaker, and a taser on there. So especially for our women out there, we want you guys to be protected. There are some sick individuals in this world. So please follow them on Facebook, her-protection, CO, period. Great and beautiful entrepreneurship that we're seeing. So one of the things that we're talking about today is we want to talk about the importance of Black women. Part of the reason why I want to talk about this, Pops, is because of the backlash that Black women have been getting recently due to the Grammys, of the things that happened on there. And I believe that it's our due diligence to kind of not lean into that, because we could talk about that.
Right, that's right.
But we kind of want to show a different perspective of the women who maybe don't act like that or are powerful in their own way. And I have a quote here by Dr. Frances Cress Wessling, rest in peace. And she said, we are the only people on this entire planet who have been taught to sing praise our demeaning. I'm a B-word, I'm a hoe, I'm a gangster, I'm a thug, I'm a dog. If you can train people to demean and degrade themselves, you can oppress them forever. You can even program them to kill themselves and they won't even understand what happened. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because we see the things that are going on with our Black women. The Black woman is probably the most abused person on this planet.
That's right.
We see the things that's happening with Breonna Taylor. We just see the disrespect, not just from white people. We see the disrespect from Black men towards our Black women. So one of the things that we want to do is kind of bring that into perspective. Now, we can't speak for women. Of course, we would never try to do that, but we want to try to bring some praise to our African American sisters, especially. Right. And a lot of this applies to women in general, but we kind of want to highlight our African American women. Because for me personally, Dad, I know you know this, that I was raised around nothing but powerful women.
That's right.
No disrespect to the uncles in my life, no disrespect to the men in my life. They played their part. But when you talk about strength, when you talk about, power, that comes from the women in my life. Even going to spend time with you, being around grandmother, being around great grandmother, being around Aunt Talma, being around Aunt Jean.
That's right.
Being around, my grandmother that was married to my grandfather, Grandma Ann. Being around so many powerful women at home. While my mom wasn't there, my aunt held the house down, even though she was only a couple of years older than me.
That's right.
My aunt, she held it down. We see that a lot in the African American community where, the aunts, the mothers, the grandmothers, those are the ones that are the glue, not only to the family, they're the glue to the world.
And typically that happens because the black male is usually absent.
Right.
However, in you guys' case, in Shaquan's case, black males were present. We were there. But the women are the ones that are in the forefront.
Right.
And rightly so. My mom was probably 5'2" in her Sunday's best, but at the same time, when it came time to get with you,
right,
she would get with you. And it didn't matter what age you were or how tall you were, because you guys were taller than her. And you were probably, 8, 9 years old, but she had no problem getting with you. And what I mean by that is not necessarily with a belt, because she didn't mind doing that, but in conversation, giving you some information on what she expected you to do and why. My mom was big on giving you the whys,
right,
and educating us on how black men should conduct themselves, but also and how we're supposed to treat women. Now, I'll be the first to admit we didn't always listen, especially when it came to how to treat women. And now with a 51-year-old male, I can tell you that the oppressed people have became the oppressors in a lot of situations.
Right.
We were oppressed for so many years by white America, and we are now oppressing ourselves.
Right.
Mainly black women. So I think it's important for black women to understand that although this was a tort behavior, it's not accepted. It's not acceptable. And the only way to change that is to get black women to understand their value. And sometimes I think understanding your place in history can give you that value.
Right. So, and again, when we talk about just history alone, coming from our African American sisters, they are probably one of the most important part of any organization, any movement, any rebellion, any type of thing that happened. There was always female, especially black female, involved.
That's right.
But even before the black man is involved, even before the white woman is involved, you see the black woman involved in so many things, as we've talked about on the past few episodes. When you look at Harriet Tubman,
that's right.
In the Civil War, when we look at the way that they conduct themselves, when we just talked about activism,
that's right,
especially in the education. So I want to start with the education from what we picked up off last week is, of course, the African American woman, as you said, was, such a caring heart that she wanted to be an educator.
That's right.
That's part of her nature.
That's right.
And one thing we know as African American, especially as men, is Elijah Muhammad taught this was the woman is the first teacher of the child.
Absolutely.
So when we look at just in the household, the things that the child learns early on comes from that nurturing, comes from that love, comes from that support and caring of the woman.
That's right.
And outside of the household, especially for black women, you see them most of the time being the babysitters. You see them most of the time being the women at the daycare. A lot of black people won't even take their kids to the daycare unless it's that one black female there that can be able to hold stuff down. And we see this through early childhood development. Most black women like to assort themselves into, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. They like to get our kids early on again because even women, you don't see a lot of males in that educational market.
That's right.
In early childhood, they tell you they ain't got the patience for it.
They don't have the patience or that level of care that you get from a woman.
Right.
Also, we talked about it before when it came to sports, with recreational sports all the way up to high school. When I used to coach basketball, it was a bunch of mothers at those basketball games. Now, I applaud the fact that now when I go, it's a lot of fathers there now.
Right.
But back in the early 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s, it was mostly mothers that were bringing those kids to those events. And they were, like I said, at the forefront of those learning experiences, those early learning experiences that black kids would get.
Right. And if you look inside the black home, one of the main teaching concepts is doing your duty, your
That's
due
right.
diligence. In the African American community, we don't call it chores.
That's right.
There's no chores. You do what's asked of you because that's your contribution to the house.
Absolutely.
There
Your
is
responsibility.
Yeah, and there's no allowance that comes with it.
No,
you know,
not going to reward you for doing what I told you.
Right. So already one of the first things that you learn as an African American child is that you're not entitled to anything.
That's
you
right.
know, you sleep here, you eat here, so it's your duty, your responsibility to clean up after yourself, to clean the house. I know growing up, mom wanted the house clean by the time she got home. And her basic thing was, I shouldn't have to go to work and work hard and come home and work again while y'all just sitting here, you know, living your lives.
That's right.
You know, so
and putting all the stuff under the bed in the closet wasn't the way of cleaning up either.
Right. So we see that early on growing up, especially in the black household, that, you know, we're taught at a very young age. And this has nothing to do with education. Most black women, even ones that are not educated, they still have that woman intuition.
That's right.
They still have that presence that they can tell you when something ain't right. They can tell you when how to behave and how to conduct yourself, because that's part of being an African American woman.
That's right.
So we talk about this, and I'm saying this specifically because I didn't understand it at one time. But the African American woman, the main thing that she has to teach her child that a white woman doesn't have to teach their child is to be careful. Now, being careful is not going out there looking both ways when you cross the street.
That's right.
That's not being careful to the African American. It is careful, but we have to come from a different perspective, which is like, watch who you're around. Watch who you hang around. Watch the things that you do. Watch what you're wearing and who you're around when you're wearing it. As we've seen with the Trayvon Martin wearing the hoodie situation. If you're in the mall, a lot of people don't say, they're telling kids not to roam the mall because soon as something come up stolen, you're the first person they're going to blame.
That's right.
These are the type of things that black women have to explain to their kids early on. So even when you're going to school, you know, a black mother has to tell her child, everybody ain't going to like you. You're going to come across some comments that's going to be, you know, racist or prejudiced against you. And a lot of people don't have to have those conversations, but a black woman does have those conversations.
Absolutely.
So for my mom, you know, one of the things that I talk about it in my book until I die is the scariest thing for a black mom is getting that phone call in the middle of the night, because you automatically think it's about your African American son.
Something he's dead
to him,
or he's in jail.
Right.
That's right.
So, you know, having curfew at a younger age, I didn't understand it, but now as an adult, I understand it because of the way that the African American is presented in this world and how much trouble he can get in whenever the woman is not present.
That's right. And even when the woman is present, it still can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, that mother's intuition was huge, because most of the time your mother would know what you've done before you even get home.
Right. So when we look at, you know, black women, number one, we're talking about the educational side. We talked about this last week, was, of course, that black educators have high expectations out of black students, which is something that is very, very necessary in our educational system. This is why we need not just more educators, we need more African American educators with those type of hearts.
That's right.
Not just early on in schoolhood, we need more African American women in the high school level that can still give that care, that love, and for the education. And another thing when it comes to African American women is they're our healers. They're the world's healers. You know, a black woman's heart is her medicine. And, you know, black women have taken care of white children. They've taken care of their own children. That's right. They've taken care of white men. That's right. If you go back to slavery, they take care of black men today. Some adults that they take care of like their kids. So, you know, they're always been the healers of the world. And even if you look at job related, most women, black women, go into jobs of either education or nursing.
That's right.
Those are one of the main two fields that they go into. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's simple because mothers are truly the mothers of civilization.
Right.
So without a woman, we wouldn't be it.
Right.
So obviously they are very important to civilization because without them, it would not exist. But let's go back for a second. Let's go back to a guy we talked about last week, Horace Mann. Horace Mann is the mastermind behind, in part of the educational system we now have right now, in building that structure of the educational system. But part of what Horace Mann did was say that women should not only be educated, because he believed that an educated woman had value in society, but also that educators should be women.
Right.
So he wanted more women to be teachers.
Right.
So he wanted them to be educated in the homes, but he also felt like that they could be teachers and that they would be more valuable than men, because at that time, we're talking about the mid 1800s, there weren't any women teachers. So he wanted to create that avenue of having women as teachers. Also, for black women have been left out of movements for so long. So we go back to 1896, is when black men was actually given the right to vote. There's a lot of people don't know this, so I want you to Google whatever you need to do. But in 1896 was when we actually had the right to vote. Right. And white women said, wait a minute, you're going to let black men vote before white women? So obviously in the 1920s is when they passed amended the Constitution to allow white women to vote. So technically black men had the ability to vote before white women.
Right.
But guess who was left out?
Black women.
Black women were left out. However, what changed that was as white women got their rights to vote, they still weren't treated differently. So they weren't getting equal pay. They weren't getting some of the jobs that men were getting. And at the same time, guess who was coming to the forefront? Black women. Black women. So white women, Susie B. Anthony, we'll go ahead and throw her name out there, decided that, now I'm not going to say that she was against slavery or for slavery, but she's considered an anti-slavery. She's considered an abolisher.
Right.
So obviously she got with black women and said, hey, we want to fight for your cause as well, because it was a joint venture. Obviously, white women was going to benefit from anything that black women could help them achieve. Yeah. So it was a mutual agreement. We're going to benefit. You're going to benefit. Women, you're going to unite, and we're going to do some things. I want people to keep in mind. I want to get the time span correct too, because I think this is important. When we talk about the NAACP, I want to talk about something that happened prior to the NAACP. There was another organization that was started because Ida B. Wells, I believe, was one of the co-founders of the NAACP. And prior to that, there was another organization, and I'm gonna find it in a second.
Oh, take your time, brother.
I'm gonna find, because I think this is important. Mary Church Terrell, one of the first females to earn a college degree, and was one of the co-founders of an organization called National Association of Colored Women.
Right.
In 1896, right? Ida B. Wells, along with some other co-founders, didn't create the NAACP till 1913.
Yeah.
So just to let you know, before there was a movement to help advance black people, there was a movement to help advance black women first.
Right.
So I think that's critical for every black woman to understand that a lot of what you saw in the civil rights movement started with women.
Right. And when you talk about activism, there is no way to talk about activism while leaving the black woman out. Even if you look at the marches today, we'll start there. We'll start there and we'll go back.
That's right.
So if you look at the marches today, most of the marches are led by black women.
That's right.
Most of them, when you see them at the forefront, they're led by black women. And when we begin to look at the success of our people of Stacey Abrams, of Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the success, we owe it to go back to, the beginning of people like Sojourner Truth.
That's right.
When we look at her standing in front of people saying, "Ain't I a woman?"
That's right.
If you want to go back and look at that, when you look at a Maria Stewart, who was just a maid to a clergyman and became one of the first African Americans to speak to an all white audience.
Right. Phyllis Wheatley was not only one of the most educated black women in the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the most educated people in the world,
right?
Not just America, but in the world.
Right.
She actually traveled to foreign countries. Her slave owner would take her to other countries because she was so educated. She learned so quickly that he would take her to France. He would take her to Britain. And she was viewed as one of the most educated people in the world.
Right.
In the 1700s.
1700s. And we look at, the civil rights movement. I know they pan the light on Dr. King a lot, but when we look at Fannie Lou,
that's right.
We look at how monumental she was and, helped the Voting Rights Act to get passed.
That's right.
When we look at, of course, Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells was in the South writing about the lynchings that was going on.
Absolutely.
And she was actually carrying a gun around with her because she expected to be killed for it.
That's right.
So when you look at the people like that, of course, we have our Rosa Parks is in the NAACP.
That's
right. Of course, we have our Assata Shakur and Angela Davis out of the Black Panther Party. When you begin to look at the musicians, now that is the key one right there, is because one of the things that helped the Black movement was Black entertainers that perform for white audiences. When we look at a Billie Holiday with her song "Strange Fruits,"
that's right.
When we looked at a Nina Simone and her song about protesting,
Mississippi Goddamn.
Mississippi Goddamn. So when we look at those individuals, how Black women was able to push the movement forward, it shouldn't surprise you when you see a Stacey Abrams.
That's right.
But people are so surprised by it because a lot of people don't know history.
Exactly.
And the only thing you know about history is the things that African Americans do, or you understand history by Rosa Parks just saying about us. No, there were people doing things behind the scenes, and that's the thing about a woman. A woman ain't got a problem.
Ain't got to be in the forefront.
Yeah, they ain't got a problem with doing things behind the scenes.
That's right.
And allow other people to get credit for it because. Again, going back to their importance, the number one thing that they are, they're the biggest supporters of Black men.
That's right. That's right.
So when we look at, just the support system of the Black woman, again, you talked about it when you go to the sports. Now, if you go to a sports game, you'll see the fathers at the sports game and you'll see them take credit for the kid.
That's right.
But
practice.
Practice. Credit. You go to the practice, you go helping them with their homework while getting dinner ready, getting them to school. When you talk about the legwork
that's right.
that goes into a child, you're talking about the mother.
Absolutely.
You're talking about the support system. Even if you look at politics again, one of the main supportive systems that America didn't understand recently was Michelle Obama.
That's right.
So reading the movie, reading the book Becoming, when she began to give speeches during Obama's campaign, a lot of people didn't take her well.
That's right.
Because she was the woman that they felt shouldn't have been speaking.
That's right.
But she was like, I'm here to help my husband.
That's right.
I'm here to do my part.
And I'm here to help you.
Yeah, right.
Obviously. And, as Black women, the other thing that's important about this is none of these women that we're naming did anything that can't be done by any other Black woman.
Any other Black woman.
What they did is they decided that they wanted to learn more.
Right.
They decided that they wanted to teach other people, mainly their kids, so that they can obviously have more. Somebody asked me one time when you guys got to the age where you could beat me in basketball, which I still don't know when that was, but they said, your son can probably beat you in basketball. How do you feel about that? I was like, I feel good about that. Right. The goal is for them to be better than me. It's always been that. So for Black mothers, they want their kids to have more than what they've had or what they currently have. Right. They want more for them. They don't want them to be like them. Mm-hmm. No parent does. But I can talk about Black mothers. Black mothers obviously want their kids to do well. Mm-hmm. And they want the best for them. and there is nothing about that that's gonna change. No matter what that child does, I can tell you now, no matter what that child does, that mother is still gonna be there. You don't know how many Black mothers I've seen in visiting rooms visiting their sons in prison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very few Black fathers. Okay. But the mothers would stick by him and be in that visiting room every weekend.
Because you're always going to be my child. That is the Black woman's perspective. There's some Black men that still they may call their mothers and say, "Hey, how do I set up this doctor's appointment? How do I do this?" Because the Black woman that's taking care of so much in a Black man's
absolutely
life, they find it hard to adjust or live without that Black woman.
It drives me crazy when I have friends say that, "Man, my mother driving me crazy." Now, I'm talking about adult males, right? My mother's driving me crazy. Every time I call her, she's talking about the next door neighbor. And I said, "Oh, you know what I would give right now to have my mother complain about anything?"
Yeah.
My mother's been dead 20 years. Mm-hmm. I would love to sit on the phone and have her complain about everything under the sun.
Right.
And at the end of it, I'll say, "Mama, love you."
Right.
Enjoy that. Then it's not going to be here. And one day it's not going to be here and you're going to miss that. So, I implore for Black men to start looking at Black women differently. And what I mean by that is rap music. I love rap music. I love entertainment. And you got to draw a line somewhere. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't listen to it. People shouldn't like it. People shouldn't watch the video. What I'm saying is what you see is entertainment. Mm-hmm. That's not instruction guide on how to treat Black women. Right. And you can't look at it as an instruction guide. Mm-hmm. And if your parents aren't telling you that, then I'm going to tell you that.
Right.
Okay? Don't look at that as an instruction guide to how to treat women or even how to make money.
Right.
Okay? Because a part of treating women bad that makes money is called pimping. Mm-hmm. Okay? Been around for centuries. Don't be a pimp.
Right.
Okay? Don't make money off of degrading women.
Right.
Okay? Whether it's music, pimping, or just in conversation, mm-hmm. or treating them differently. And if you're a supervisor, if you're a manager, don't treat the woman differently just because she's a woman.
Right.
Okay? Because now you're becoming the oppressor. You're doing to Black women the same thing that white America did to all of us in the past.
Right. So again, when you're talking about treating Black women, we have to begin going back to what you said. We have to treat Black women like we would treat our Black mother.
That's right.
So a lot of people wouldn't do certain things or talk a certain way in front of their mom or grandmother. We have to have that same type of respect to the women that you come across.
That's
now,
right.
I'm not even going to put, because most people say, okay, we got to have Black women be held accountable. Understand the Black women that act in the way that they act sometimes is due to the disrespect of the Black man.
Absolutely.
So we have to first, as men, because the last thing we're going to do is try to tell women how to behave.
Absolutely.
But as a Black man, what I can say is that we have to begin to cherish them more.
Absolutely.
We have to begin to love them more because they are the biggest lovers, the biggest supporters of anybody in the world. But then it's not reciprocated.
Absolutely.
It's not reciprocated to them.
Absolutely. Men always say that they love an intelligent woman. Mm-hmm. We say it all the time.
Yeah.
They love a woman that's intelligent. And until she's trying to tell us something to do, all of a sudden your intelligence is not respected.
Right.
But I've learned over the years, I go into Walmart sometimes and I see an elderly couple. And I'll see the woman putting stuff in the basket and the man just stands there. "What do you think of this?" "Oh, I think that's lovely, dear." And she puts it in the basket and they get to the register and she puts the stuff up and, rings it up and she slides the cart through and he pulls out his wallet and pays for it.
Right.
Mutual understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding your responsibility. Right. You can call it stay in your lane. You call it whatever you want. But it's understanding your responsibility. Mm-hmm. And the responsibility of that man is to support that woman. Even if it's something you may not really enjoy doing. Like, if you got to go to a movie to see something you don't really want to see, but your woman wants to see it,
right.
Go see it. How many basketball games has she said watch? And she don't really care about basketball.
Right.
Understanding your responsibility.
And we are back. Again, this episode is brought to you by Her Protection. Is here to give you a fighting chance in dangerous and harmful situations, giving you protection, power, and peace of mind. Our self-defense keychain are stylish and loaded with a pepper spray, window breaker, taser, and more. Get protected with Her Protection. Follow on the Facebook page, her-protection.co, period. So picking up right where we left off, we were talking about, just the leadership factor. And again, we can see that from spirituality, religious situations as well. Mm-hmm. As when you look into the church, when you look into praying or spiritual callings or whatever, that's right, what you want to call it, we see women outnumber men drastically.
Absolutely.
I actually have one here. It says African American women comprise more than 70% of the active membership of generally any African American congregation one might attend today. According to studies, African American women are among the most religiously committed of any type of organization that deals with that type of system. So again, when you look at the Black woman, they're the first to go to church about it. They're the first to pray about it. They're the first that you call for healing about it. They're the first people that you call because they're so connected to a supreme being.
That's right.
Whether that's through the church, whether that's through the mosque, whether that's through meditation, whatever the case may be, natural resource, whatever the case may be, they are the first people that you call.
That's right.
When it comes to that, because they have a solid foundation, again, in healing, nurturing, support system. So they rely on that.
And taking care of issues.
Right.
When there's issues, the Black woman is the first one to start formulating ideas of a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting because there was a study, one done in 2014, then again in 2016, basically just claims that the most educated group in America, Black women.
Mm-hmm.
Black women. There's actually studies that say that women learn at a faster rate than men.
Mm-hmm.
Black women especially.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a lot to do with what they call, I think it's called episodic memory,
mm-hmm.
where they're able to take episodes and be able to memorize. So like if you're telling them, there was 10 birds and there were 8 trucks and there was 7 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks later, they can tell you exactly what those were, where men have trouble with those kind of things. So when you talk about scripture, you talk about spirituality, women can usually take the Bible verses, and even if they can't repeat them verbatim,
mm-hmm.
they can tell you what it meant. They can tell you an interpretation of it and how to apply it in your everyday life.
Right.
Women are really good at that. And that's what studies say, that they're really good at that. Also, their cognitive functions deteriorate slower than men, which is why at the elderly level, you see more elderly women taking care of their husbands because of those type of things.
Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to communication when you talk about the educational and how they're able to take information and draw it much faster than a man can, because of course they start communicating very earlier than men do.
That's right.
They'll tell you that men started creating sounds when they're doing cars. And
that's right.
But women, they would do the voiceovers when playing with Barbies.
Absolutely.
So communication is already at an all-time high when it comes to women. And again, this is a problem that they're facing is through the religious sectors, they have a hard time of being leaders.
That's right.
Because as we see in most denominations in church, they do not want women pastors. They do not want women leaders. They don't want to follow women. But when we look at it from a different perspective, not religiously, that they are the perfect people to lead.
Absolutely.
Because when you look at the things that they are able to do, again, we go back to that love, that tender, that care, that nurture,
that's right,
that they give. That is what is religiously needed more so than anything else in this world right now is that healing factor that they can give through pastoring or ministering or whatever the case may be. But again, they take up so much space in the congregation. I believe they should get that just due in be able to be in that pulpit and lead, because I believe they have effective leadership qualities that men do not have.
That's right. But one of the things that I think hold women back in those situations is they necessarily fight for it because they don't want to create a disturbance. They don't want to create dissension. See, once again, they're taking on that motherly role and keeping the family together, keeping everybody happy, keeping things consistent, not being different. So they don't necessarily always want to fight for those things. And they shouldn't have to fight. Let me say that. Right. They should not have to fight. But once it's on, it's on. You know, everybody has a plan till they get in the mouth. Right. So once you know it's on and you're not going to get that, fight for it. Right. Fight for it because women deserve it. And you just go all the way back to education. I still believe this, and you heard me say this on every podcast, that I think one of the equalizers in America is education. And we're not just talking about equalizing in terms of white and black. We're also talking about in terms of male and female. Is education. The more educated you are, usually the better choices you have, and then the better choices you're going to make. So education is huge. When you think about integrating the school system, people always think about Brown versus board education. Right. A lot of people don't even know what that is.
That was a lot of cases into one case.
Absolutely. And they all involve women.
Right.
They all involve women.
From Virginia to Kansas to like 3 or 4 other states. Right. There were many cases that were involved around that decision.
That's right.
And women were at the forefront. They actually outnumbered the men plaintiffs by a lot.
That's right.
By a lot.
And I know, obviously, Oliver Brown's name was on the petition because he was the man. But it was his wife who said, no, we got to do it. Because he was hesitant. He was like, I don't really want my daughter to go to that school. You know, if they don't want her there, I don't want her to go. And the wife was like, we got to do this. She needs to go to this school. She can get a better education. Now, just so people can understand, I don't want to keep going way back in history, but when you talk about right at the start of the Jim Crow laws, what happened is, I think it was maybe 1896 that what they adapted is that separate but equal.
Separate but equal.
Separate but equal. So that means that the black schools were supposed to get the same level of education as the white schools. Right. So the same amount of funding, not just the education, but the buses, the schools, the structure of the schools, the curriculum, the books, everything was supposed to be equal, which we know it wasn't.
It wasn't. Right.
So what Linda Brown's mom wanted, Linda Brown is the little girl that ended up going to the high school in Topeka, Kansas. And she was the first one to do so. And initially, all the white parents pulled their kids out of school. They're not going. And you know what? There was one teacher that said, I'll teach her. So for the first couple of weeks, she was the only student in her class. There was no other student. The one little black girl was the only student this teacher had. And slowly but surely, people came around, and then you had the other 3, because initially there were 6 kids that was part of that petition. One dropped out and ended up going to a black school. The other 3 ended up being the first 3 black kids to go to another school in New Orleans. Okay? So, but these are all girls. These are all women doing this. This is not men. These are all girls. And another little known history fact, Medgar Evers was assassinated in 1963. The same year he filed the lawsuit to desegregate schools. So obviously they did not want us to get the same level of education. So again, I say to women, you learn faster than men. You recall information faster than men. You are the most educated group in America. I say, continue to do that. Read, listen, learn, and then take that. Each one teach one. Pass it on to someone else.
So again, when you talk about, Ford versus the Brown of education, when we talk about Plessy versus Ferguson, when we talk about all of these concepts that, women had a lot to do with, again, you talked about being, the women going in. So when you look at the girls, the first people you see going into the schools are Ruby Bridges.
That's right.
Dorothy Counts. You're seeing the girls, the women going in doing these things.
That's right.
And this is why when we talk about Black history, especially because you told me, look into the women on Black history.
That's
Most of the posts that I posted on Black History Month was for women. When you look at the first African American woman to graduate or to get a master's degree, I want you to think about how prejudiced they had to do. One woman had to sit outside of the classroom. She couldn't even go in to get this education. She had to sit outside of the classroom. to get this education. So when you look at black men, okay, yeah, they had to struggle to get through. But when you look at black women, their struggle was even harder because they were black and they were women. So when we look at that, we have to begin to look at that they deserve the right to be able to be in those leadership roles. And I know the churches have their bylaws that came from way back when, but a lot of bylaws have been adjusted to the time frame that we live in.
That's right.
And I believe that's one of the ones that has to be adjusted. And I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but I believe women earn that respect and they earn that value to be able to do so. So again, when we look at black women, of course, we can go from the spiritual aspect. And one thing I want to touch on was the entrepreneurship.
That's right.
We're seeing more black women are becoming entrepreneurs. Actually, new entrepreneurs, black women represent 42%
That's right.
of new entrepreneurs and new businesses, opening up more than 3 times more than anybody else.
That's right.
So when you look at how much they have been supporters, how much they've been the backbone for other people.
Absolutely.
Now they're stepping out and saying, now it's my time.
That's right. If you go back to the 30s, mid 30s to early 40s, a lot of the juke joints, if you will, that were owned by what we thought were black men were not. They were really owned by black women.
Right.
However, there would have been nobody coming if that black woman would have been in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So they called it June's place. So June could be the center of attraction, saying it's his business, but it was really Mahler's. Right. It was really his wife's place. So once again, I think over time that we have adopted the black culture has adopted some of the teachings of white America where we helped oppress us. Mm-hmm. And we're all guilty of it. We've oppressed the black man, we've oppressed the black woman, and together we've oppressed each other.
Right. So when you look at that, that's going to segue into what we're talking about next is, of course, that black women have become entrepreneurs, not only because of that, it's because of the problems that they face into the workplace.
That's right.
Black families depend on black women's earnings. Over 80% of black mothers are breadwinners, yet many have caregiving responsibilities for an elderly parent, a person with a disability, or a young child, which they must balance out these obligations. And we see our black women, they don't get the equal pay that most black males get or white women get. They have a lower percentage of getting promotions. They have a harder time just being themselves in a worker environment. I have an article here that I want to read. See if I can find it.
Take your time.
It says your work is judged plus other intangible things. A lot of women told me that they code switch, which involves embracing the dominant culture among certain groups and switching to a more authentic self when around friends and family. So what this means is whenever they go into a workplace, they basically have to take on another personality until they get home. Because when you look at the workplace, they're so outnumbered. A black woman is so outnumbered in the workplace.
That's right.
That when they go in, they're surrounded by, let's just take, for instance, white coworkers, white women coworkers. Now, let's just take, for instance, a situation happens in the country. Let's take Trayvon Martin, for example. Mm-hmm. Let's say when Trayvon Martin is killed, let's say that those white coworkers have a conversation, which a lot of them did, that said, maybe he deserved it. He was a thug,
right?
All that sort of thing.
That's right.
And now this black woman who's alone and outnumbered 1 to 10
can't say anything
because if she says anything, she's the angry black woman.
That's right.
And if she says anything, she's the odd person out, and
she's the problem.
She's the problem.
That's right.
So she actually has to stay quiet and then voice her frustrations when she get home. And a lot of black women call it they have to dim their life when they go to work.
That's right.
They can't be their authentic self. You even think about a black lady answering the phone. She almost has to change her tone of voice.
That's right.
To sound white so the person on the phone can feel more inviting to have a conversation with her. Because that's another topic. There was a survey that came out that
that showed that whenever a customer called and spoke to a woman, he was more belligerent than speaking to a man.
Absolutely.
And one of the things they are even sending emails, if the email, the signature part was a woman's name, the person responding to the email will be more belligerent
That's right.
than if there were
and sometimes condescending.
Right.
That's
so
right.
You begin to look at just the male and female factor, and then you throw in the
being black. That's right.
Black factor. We see the problems that a lot of African women are facing in the workplace. And that article was written by Maura Cheeks out of for the Harvard Business Review, and it says a lot of women surveyed said that they have to they have to have a work personality and then be themselves when they get home. Black women are encouraged to dim their light. Think about work conversations and high-paying company and conversations that they can't speak their mind. So that's one of the problems, is being able to be your authentic self. The second problem is a lot of Black educated women can't find high corporate paying jobs.
That's right.
So it says, I have another article here written this by, I can't remember what her name is, but she talks about Morgan Jennings, an Ivy League graduate student, said, after I graduated college, that year was probably the worst year of my life. I felt like giving up writing every single day. I couldn't have potential or be good. Good is for the white woman. I had to be extraordinary, and it almost destroyed me. I never want another person of color to go through what I went through. I thought my light was dimming all the time. I felt worthless in so many ways. So you take a Black woman who goes to college, beats the odds, creates her independence, becomes intellectual, probably disrespected by Black men for being intellectual, and then have to try to find a job, pay back those student loans,
That's
probably
right.
raise a child, whatever the case may be. You look at the odds that they have to face against once they step into a workplace,
That's
and
right.
then odds they have to face when they step at home.
You do all of that, and as Jay-Z said in his song, still in work.
Yeah.
Still in work.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, you do all of that, and you still view it a different way. Also, with that, you also have the fact that these women, like you said, they can't be their authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
So you have things that come about in these conversations in the corporate world pertaining to Black women and their heritage, where they start talking about how they wear their hair. And this is huge.
Okay.
So you have women who like to wear what we call the natural look, afro, whatever it is, where it's unpermed. It's not, in certain cases, it may not be curly.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be any of those things that white America says should be acceptable for a Black person in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
And we, Black people, have relegated to that for so many years that we've agreed to that.
Mm-hmm.
We've agreed to that in a certain sense. I've had so many people tell me, because I work in corporate America,
Mm-hmm.
and I have people say, they let you work with a beard? What do you mean let? What
Right.
is this? What is this, 1912?
Right.
What do you mean let me work with a beard? Because for so long, it wasn't accepted for men to have facial hair.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants you to be clean shaven. That's considered the business look,
Right.
is when you're clean shaven. So Black women have it harder than that
Mm-hmm.
because the natural hair. So what a woman does is says, okay, I'll go get braids. Whoa, wait a minute. That's not acceptable. Dreadlocks, not acceptable.
Right.
So but you don't have them going to white women saying that, you can't do this or you can't do that.
Right.
It's always something referring to the Black woman and what she should be doing or should not be doing, or what she be wearing, should be wearing or shouldn't be wearing. And anytime she says anything egregious,
Mm-hmm.
they say she's an angry Black woman.
Right. So when you begin to look at that, that's being too Black. When you wear the dreads, when you wear the dreadlocks, when you wear the braids, that's considered being too Black for
That's right.
corporate America. And I face that. People who start off working at the job say they let you wear your hair like that long. Yeah.
Yeah, like
But now, but again, I do understand that they're not gonna let me just let it grow wild out, because
Right.
I understand for them that's too Black.
That's right.
That's too Black for and I have a chart here that shows the pay scale. This is actually from 2017. and this actually was published in 2020. So it may have changed a little bit since then, but white men earn an average of $52,000 a year. White women, $41,000. Black men, $39,000. Black women, $35,000.
Yes.
So you see on just the pay scale at how different that is and who's at the bottom of the pay scale from all that they offer to the world. So again, when we look at the work side, we look at the family side, we already see the lines being drawn for African American women. But hold that down. We're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to come back and wrap this up. And we are back. Again, this episode is sponsored by Her Protection, to give you a fighting chance in a dangerous or harmful situations, giving you protection, power, peace of mind. Our self-defense keychains are stylish, loaded with pepper spray, window breaker, taser, and more. Get protected with Her Protection. Follow on Facebook page, Her-Protection CO. So again, picking up where we left off, we want to talk about, again, we went through this whole spiel about, who women are, the disrespect that women face. And the last thing I wanted to make known is the sacrifices that women make.
That's right.
I remember you told me a story. I want you to tell it on this podcast about something that you didn't know about grandma growing up, that about her eating half a sandwich. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, my mom we would go to McDonald's. And for people that know me, that's my favorite restaurant, so don't judge. But we would go to McDonald's and we would get food, and she would always eat half of her sandwich and then put it in the microwave. And of course, me being greedy would always say, "Well, you gonna eat that?" She would say, "No." She loved to see us eat. I remember when you guys were kids, it thrilled her to just watch you guys eat.
Right.
And that's part of that mothering nature that we talked about. And for a long time, my mother did things that we didn't understand. And it wasn't until we became adults that we really understood the nature of my mom and the things that she was doing and instilling in us. I kind of wish we would have listened early in life, but we're listening now, which is why we're doing things like this, which is why her grandkids turned out the way that they turned out. She would be so proud of you and Shaquan and Cameron. So, obviously that woman created this thing. She started this thing going.
Right. So, when you look at that, of course, my mother, she dropped out of high school to, as she was pregnant, and her thing was she always wanted us to, again, like you talked about, be better than her, get the education that she couldn't. And she was fine with that. She was 100% fine with that. And that is the sacrifice that most Black women make on a daily basis. When you talk about Black women, so most people like to bring up teen pregnancy when it comes to a Black woman. And you don't understand, you may look down upon that, but we've seen so many strong Black women come from teen pregnancy. Now, I'm not championing it, but what I am saying is you can't degrade a female that gets pregnant at 16 and hold it down.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things my mom told all of us, I have two brothers, is that if and when you do get a girl pregnant, the last thing I want to hear come out of your mouth is she sure it's mine?
Right.
Because nobody's going to put it on you. You ain't got nothing.
Right.
So nobody's going to lie and say a child is yours. The other thing she taught us is that it is a blessing to have a child. No, now, we're not talking about rape. We're not talking about that. We're talking about when somebody makes the decision to have unprotected sex.
Right.
We're not talking about rape. That's completely different.
So when you talk about, because again, a man has the choice to say, I ain't taking care of it.
Absolutely.
That is the freedom that a man has given, unrightfully so.
That's right.
But he's given that freedom, especially if you're 16, 17 years old. Most of the parents will tell you, go get a DNA test, that probably ain't yours. You messing up your life.
That's right.
That woman, that little girl, 16-year-old young woman that's having that baby, I don't think most most 16, 17-year-olds aren't even thinking about giving up that baby.
They're not thinking about it. And then the sacrifices, this is important. That's a key point you just brought up. The minute the girl finds out she's pregnant, her life changes. For the man, it may never change. It may never change. Because he may decide he doesn't want to be a dad. It may never change for him.
Right.
But the minute that the female finds out she's pregnant, her life changes. The sacrifice starts there.
Right. Now, I will commend some people. There are a lot of single fathers out here who have custody of the kid. Champion y'all as well, but I got to champion my sisters first. Because again, I did read a meme that said, a woman most likely never gets the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't feel like dealing with these kids. They have to be around 24/7. So when we see the Black woman, we see the person that is giving up their dreams. They give up their dreams and goals for their kids.
That's right.
They give up their dreams and goals for the man that they marry.
That's right.
Most of the time you see the woman give up and she follow the man. We see that the Black woman gives the world to people, and I believe it's not reciprocated.
Absolutely.
We see Black women raise Black men. We see Black women still currently raising Black men that are grown.
That's right.
and taking advantage of it.
That's right.
And they'll never tell them to get out because that goes back to that tender loving care that they have. We see Black women stick by men in prison, do their rights and do their wrongs. They believe that they change. They can believe that they'll fall. A Black woman will find the lowest man on the totem pole and she'll try to fix him up.
She'll try to bring him up.
She'll do whatever it takes.
So it's fair to say, would you say that the Black woman is also not just the most educated group, but the strongest group?
100%. When you look at history, of course, the African American has been through most of the history. But when you look at African American women and what they went through in history, they have to be the strongest.
That's right.
They have to be the survival. Again, not trying to go too much into it, but when you look at the rapid way and they had to reproduce during enslavement.
That's right.
You look at what they had to deal with in enslavement.
And then how did they talk a little bit about how they protected their kids in slavery and how that translates into what you see some parents even doing today.
All right, so one of the things when you look at the enslavement of the Black child, growing up in slavery, and you see it in the movies that the kids are kind of disregarded at first. A lot of Black kids don't even see themselves as Black until somebody tell them.
That's right.
So they're running around with the white kids and they're having fun. And the Black woman started teaching the Black child early, how to conduct themselves and what not to do. And then when the white mistress of the house began to come to the Black woman and say, oh, he's getting tall, he's getting stronger, he's getting bigger. And what that means, one or two things. We're either going to put him out on the field to work now,
we're going to bring him down.
We're going to bring him down. Or sell him because that was the highest commodity, was a female that could reproduce and a male that could be strong enough to reproduce.
That's right.
So when you look at that, a Black woman seeing that her kids were constantly torn from her. If she didn't act right, the kids were sold away.
That's right.
If something happened, the kids were being threatened to be sold away from her. So when you look at today, one of our powerful sisters said this, and she said, when you go into an assembly or a parent-teacher conference or a play, and you see the people champion the Black kid and say, oh, he's such a good kid, he's growing up, he's smart, all of this, you must be very proud. And the Black woman is sometimes, brush it off and say, oh, he hard-headed, you take him off my hands, or whatever the case may be, whatever they downplay it. But then behind closed doors, she'll go to that child and say, I'm so proud of you. You're amazing. But she can't do that publicly, because if you champion the Black kid publicly and you put him on a pedestal, America finds a way to bring him down.
Find a way to bring him down or exploit him. Or exploit him.
Right. Yep. So when we see that, the Black woman is very, very careful what she exposes and what she exposes her child to. And I even champion the Black women that still rip and run around man to man. a lot of times they want to bring that man around their child.
Right.
They'll do whatever they want you to do behind closed doors. We'll do this. We'll hang out, whatever.
But I ain't ready
I ain't
to
bringing
bring
around
my
my
kids.
child
That's
because
right.
I understand that the importance of the influences he needs to be around,
The images he needs to see.
Right.
That's
So, and I also read it was a status that was put up the other day. I didn't comment on it because I wanted to save it for this. It said, can a woman raise a child to be a man? And I said, absolutely, because she may not be able to give him everything that he needs as a man, as far as her telling him personally.
Right.
But she would do whatever it takes to put him around the uncles, the cousins, the the male role models that she can to
That's
make
right.
sure he has everything he needs to succeed.
That's right.
And I've seen a lot of black men grow up to be great that was raised by single black mothers.
That's right. They are responsible for creating that support system.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily have to do it themselves, but they have to create the support system to so that you can learn those things as a man.
Right.
And there's a lot of black women that were able to do that and did it well.
Right.
And did it well.
Right.
The other thing for black women is when we talk about when we talk about history and how it plays a role in the psyche of Afro-Americans. Mm-hmm. One of the things that became huge, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I think it's important to understand some of the psychological damage that has been done to black women and the sacrifices that they've made, is that slave trade was huge. Mm-hmm. However, because such a large percentage of slaves would die in transportation, guess what became even bigger than slave trade? Slave breeding. So breeding became part of the black woman's culture, mm-hmm. is having kids. And I'm putting an S on the end because statistics say that the average black female has a minimum of 2 children mm-hmm. in the United States. So black women, not only just being the mothers of civilization, as we talked about before, but also feeling like that's their contribution to the world. Right. And in some cases, maybe they believe that's their only contribution to the world. We're here to tell you that's not. That's not your only contribution to the world. It is not. You can be more than just a mother. You can be more than just a person who takes care of kids and put them on the straight and narrow to become great. Mm-hmm. You're already great, but you can be even greater. You can be more impactful and influential in your communities. Mm-hmm. You can earn that equal pay. And we're not just talking about on local levels. You're hearing Don Staley, coach of South Carolina Gamecocks right now, talking about that. For those that love tennis like I do, Serena and Venus. Serena is almost 40, mm-hmm. and they're still talking about the fact that there's unequal pay on the circuit. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, most people want to see Serena play, yet they're not making the money that the men make. Right. In fact, on any given Sunday, Serena could probably beat most men in tennis at the professional level. I'm not just talking about little Eric down the street. Yeah. I'm talking about on a professional level, So what we want women to understand is you have value. Mm-hmm. We want you to, one, believe it, mm-hmm. and accept the responsibility that comes with that and live up to that value that you have. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're doing here is trying to, as you said before, we're not saying we're right. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be right. What we want to do is we want to spark. We want the ears to go up, the antennas to go up. Yeah. We want you to think. We want you to say, hey, who am I? Mm-hmm. What's my value? Mm-hmm. We always talk about what's my purpose. And people usually say their purpose is whatever they're doing. Right. No. How do you know that that's your purpose? Have you really dove into the things that you're good at? Mm-hmm. The things that you would like to do that you may not have gotten the opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. I tell people all the time, I played the clarinet in school. I loved it. I kind of wish that I would have continued to play instruments rather than play sports. Because right now I probably couldn't shoot a basketball. But I would love to be able to sit down on the piano and play. So for women, I say channel that energy to find out what is it that you would like to do? Mm-hmm. Where's your value other than the situations you're currently in and saying, this is my life? Because it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. And the last thing I want to touch on is one thing we like to call black women is the superwoman. And what being a superwoman does for the men who don't understand this, it doesn't give them an opportunity to be vulnerable.
That's right.
So we put a lot on our Black women because we say she can handle it.
That's right.
Because when we look at history, we know she can handle
That's
it.
right.
We know through all the abuse and rape and all of this other things, we know what she can tolerate. Doesn't mean she should have to.
That's part of the abuse.
Right. So it doesn't, and I have an article here that I want to read. And it says the stereotype of the strong Black woman is more than just a cultural trope. Many Black women in America report feeling pressure to act like Superwoman, projecting themselves as strong, self-sacrificing, free of emotion to cope with the stress of race, gender-based discrimination in their daily lives. Now, many, myself included, wear the badge of the strong Black woman with honor, and we are proud of our tenaciousness and never let the world see us crack. But we are suffering silently with the mental and physical health consequences of carrying the burden of family, work, and community responsibilities, compounded by personal experience of trauma and loss, all in an environment of racial and gender discrimination. Black women are more likely than white women to have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from childhood maltreatment and sexual and physical violence. They are more likely to have stress related to family, employment, finances, discrimination or racism, and safety concerns associated with living in high crime neighborhoods. Black women are more likely to be depressed when their symptoms are more severe, last longer, and more likely to interfere with their inability to function at work, school, and home. Black women are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. And this article is written by Inger E. Burnett. Ziegler is an assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral science at Northwestern University School of Medicine. So when we begin to look at the Black woman, we already see that she's placed on her to be strong.
That's right.
That she can take whatever comes her way. And it is a disservice, and it is dang near, what can I say? It is unappreciative or to no concern of how she may feel.
That's right.
Because we feel like she should be able to handle it. And that's unfair.
It's taking her for granted.
Right. And we see that constantly throughout what's going on in the world, that she is taken for granted at home, at work, in the community, in the church, because people say that she should be able to handle it.
That's right. And we come to expect it.
Right.
And then they get ridiculed when they can't live up to the standard. The standard that they placed on themselves, but Black men allowed them to place it on themselves. To the point that in a lot of situations, the men aren't able to really be men in certain situations because the woman is so strong. She's become so dominant in that relationship. So which is why you see sometimes relationships don't work, because the woman has become she's became so strong that it's hard for her to, one, trust, and to allow that man to be a man. And it makes the relationship even more difficult. But I still fault Black men for putting that pressure on them without going to them and say, hey, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not be as strong. That balance, you look at households, when they say that most kids who have a mother and a father at home, those kids are usually going to be better off because they have that balance. You have to have a balance at home, but also as an individual. So as that mother being strong and being, as you called it, Superwoman, she has to have another side. And unfortunately, society won't let her.
Right.
Otherwise, she's in fear of losing her kids to some form of tragedy. Right. Whether it be prison or jail or whatever, or ended up living with her, through the age of 40. But either way, they look at that as something as saying, hey, if I would have been a little bit tougher, a little bit stronger, a little bit more of a Superwoman, that wouldn't have happened.
Right. So in closing arguments, I just like to say that, to the Black women out there, we appreciate you. The Black woman has become the protector of Black men. as we see from the deaths that are happening, as we see from being shot down in the streets. You know, you see videos where the police may put a gun on a black man and the black woman jumps in front of him and say, no, don't do this. We see this happen all the time. And if nobody else tells you, you know, we appreciate you. We understand. We can't fathom to understand. Let's just put it out. I can't fathom to understand, you know, how you guys feel, how you cope with how you feel. But I can say that you are more than what the media portrays you to be. And we know they'll talk about Cardi and Meg Thee Stallion, what they did, but they won't talk about, you know, the black women that are going to college. They won't talk about, you know, the black politicians that are, and the black activists, the black educators,
black entrepreneurs.
Right. So we know that when they put Meg and Cardi up, they want to create that image that this is the way all black women are. But we know for a fact, by looking at our mothers, by looking at our grandmothers, by looking at our aunts, by looking at our cousins, by looking at our black teachers, by looking at
black vice president,
right? By looking at these people, we get it. We know your importance, and this episode is to try to help more people get it. And
we can't claim to understand because we're not women,
right?
But what we are doing is saying we're listening. I mean, if you want to talk, and that what I asked you guys to go and search for, and listen to the essay. She talks about Elisa Cross Smith, and Lisa spelled Lessa. Just Google it, and if you can get the version where somebody's actually reading it, to where you can listen to the impactful words and feel it, she understands. She understands what it is to be a black woman in America, and help us understand by talking. You know, chime in on this podcast. Let us comment. Let us know what you go through. There's no shame in being honest. The name of the podcast is Unapologetic. Okay? There's no shame. There's no shame in talking about things that bother you, things that concern you, things that may have stopped you from doing some things that you really wanted to do in life.
Right. And also understand, don't be afraid to tell people, you know, why. Because as a black man, I'm still learning.
That's right.
There are some things that my wife told me that I didn't know was degrading or hurtful. And I'm learning how to treat black women still today.
That's right.
And you have to demand their respect because you deserve it.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. So thank y'all for tuning in. We love you guys. Appreciate y'all for tuning in and rocking with us. And again, if you come across this on YouTube, subscribe and comment. Come across this on Facebook, comment, and tell us what you think and what your perspective is, because we're doing this to not be right, but we're doing this to spark thought.
That's right.
Love y'all.